Kim Edelston with FamilyBusiness.org. And today I'm here with Ruschelle Khanna, who has worked as a therapist and consultant to families in enterprise for over 20 years. She is the author of the book, Creating an Echo Legacy, Healing Generational Trauma to Foster True Wealth, to be published in spring 2024. Thank you for being with me today, Ruschelle.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here today, and this is my first interview talking about the book, so thank you so much for having me here.
Oh, wonderful. So in your book, you're going to be discussing how to heal from generational trauma. So what inspired you to write the book, and what is generational trauma?
The inspiration for the book actually came from my 20 years of working with families and individuals. And the more I've worked, the more I've seen that a lot of things do not start with the individual. A lot of relationship dynamics, a lot of complications that people have for their own mental health, for their relationship with money. So Mark Wallen wrote a book called It Didn't Start With You. And he wrote a book all about understanding generational trauma and his kind of perspective on how to heal it. And I think the title of that book is really fitting because so many decisions that we make, motivations that we have, they really, and even problems that we have, they don't really just start with us. They are picked up in childhood, in our genetics, and we're not even aware. And a lot of times we blame ourselves for those things and we take responsibility for it. And sometimes it's not yours.
What is generational trauma?
We think of it in a few different ways. One, we know that there is a component of things that are just learned in childhood. You know, how I react to how my parents are in the home and how my grandparents are directly impacts the things that I think about, especially money. So we know that our ideas about money are formed really early in life, and the imaginations that we have about how to deal with money, we really keep them unless we start to examine them as we become adults. A gentleman, Klontz is his last name, he has developed an entire kind of test and format about your money scripts. So like what narratives did we learn as a child about money? So the learned behavior is one part of it. And then the epigenetic part is another. And this is since the 90s, there has been a lot of research done on literally what we carry genetically, especially now. The cool things that they're researching are that we can actually inherit memories and thoughts. And native traditions already have had this idea that we carry our ancestors' thoughts, but now we're actually starting to be able to prove that in a lab. So yeah, the epigenetic piece is there. And of course, we know that childhood shapes our reactions.
So interesting. So with your work with family businesses, so why discuss generational trauma with them as well as with family offices?
One, it's very timely right now. I mean, everybody knows about the great wealth transfer, and there's a lot of talk about all the money that's shifting. And at the heart of it, the more I talk to family offices and businesses, there is this denial around the whole process. There are blind spots and denial about succession planning and inheritance. And, you know, denial is a defense mechanism. Denial is a behavior that keeps us safe. If we put blinders on and think that there's not a problem, then there's not a problem. And then sometimes we get blindsided by things. And I don't want families and businesses to be blindsided. You know, we want to have a large focus and be able to see the whole picture. So when we look at generational trauma, it helps us start to see the whole picture of where our business is going.
I notice a lot of families don't talk about money because they think it'll create conflict, or there are they almost don't want their children and grandchildren to know their real worth. So do you see that too? And what's your advice?
Succession planning has to start from birth. And if it is really, really done well, age appropriate conversations start early. And you said something really important, that when people don't know what their inheritance is, for an example, and a lot of boomers, that generation, intentionally kept the amount of money from the inheritors for a reason, for thinking, I want them to go out and succeed on their own. And I don't want them to know that they have this big safety net. The intention there is solid. And maybe for some people that works, but that doesn't work for everybody. And if a child knows that they have a large amount of money that is going to support them later in life, there's an opportunity to instead help them learn to honor their resources and honor their own worth around the resources, and not be taken by surprise around it or feel guilty about it. My friend Cindy Arledge, who is a succession planner, she writes in her book about in Kabbalah, unearned money is a curse. And on one hand, I get that. We have to be able to feel like we deserve that money and have a plan for that money and be good stewards of that money. And a lot of times young adults are not there. They're not equipped for that.
You talk about the liabilities of trauma for family teams, and you've articulated 5. So what are the 5 liabilities of trauma for family teams?
So the 5 liabilities of trauma, the first one is cycles of chaos. We talk about toxic work environments, but a lot of times we talk about that in terms of corporate. Well, that happens in family businesses as well. Abuse happens in family businesses. The next one is abandon. So a lot of times families have patterns of somebody feels abandoned. Maybe we were abandoned because our parents worked to build the wealth and they were never around and nannies raised us. The third one is people pleasing or fawning, when you kind of don't have an opinion and, well, it's whatever everybody else says. In a family business, this is not a good dynamic. No one should be constantly deferring or being bulldozed by somebody else in the business. That's a problem because that person is not contributing fully. The other one is overwhelm, which again is common. Like if we talk about stress in the workplace and being too overwhelmed and burnout. And then the last one, which is the most painful one, is just no engagement or shutdown. Someone has left the family. Someone wants no part of any of this anymore. And I guess what I would say to all of those is there's always an opportunity to make that right.
Obviously, talking trauma can be really heavy. How do we make it a bit more approachable?
One thing is just to start having a conversation with somebody, a trusted advisor or a consultant, just to clarify your own thoughts around what you might see as a problem in your family and what dynamics you think might be hurting the business, because a lot can be done just by one person clarifying their own experience. So, I encourage people to have consultations and assessments with trusted advisors. The other thing that I find myself saying a lot is, are you having a familiar feeling around this? So I call trauma responses familiar feelings. It's like, do you always feel like you're not heard in a meeting? Is this everywhere you go, do you feel like you're not listened to? Do you feel like everybody takes advantage of you? So what is your familiar feeling when you're in an interaction with somebody? And that's an indicator of a trauma response. So just starting to be aware of what might be a pattern that's not serving me anymore.
This is so interesting. Can you share, and it's fine if it's anonymous, an example where you've helped a family get through trauma?
I'm thinking of working with a family who had sudden wealth. The adult child grew up middle class, but then they inherited a large sum of money and really had a lot of mental health problems around that. So sudden wealth syndrome is, people laugh and joke about, oh, well, I wish I had sudden wealth syndrome. But it can be really, Morgan Housel says it can really break your brain. I think that's a term he uses in the psychology of money. So yeah, I worked with that family for several years actually, and the adult child was able to recover from that and become independent from that. I guess the main thing is that when the parents are involved with helping their adult child to move past whatever barriers they have, it makes so much of a difference. Like if parents are just willing to show up to a conversation, it is huge. I really commend any parents who are willing to have a conversation with their adult child about, things that they might feel guilty about, or things that went wrong when they were parenting.
A lot of this happens at a young age and at home. So as a last question and I actually, when I do workshops, I often get the question, how should I be raising my children? So what are maybe a couple of pieces of advice for parents in family business watching this video right now? What can they do to hopefully, I guess you would say, prevent generational trauma, make sure their children are stewards of money and understand wealth and so forth?
One main thing that I would say is be curious about your child's experience. So throughout, whether they're very small or into their teenage years, pause more and ask them what it's like for them. And that specifically addresses the trauma. Mom and dad were fighting. What was it like for you when mom and dad when we were fighting? It's perfectly okay to ask a kid what their experience is, even if the experience, maybe it seemed like, oh, we shouldn't talk about that because, that was bad and we shouldn't bring it up again. No, what was it like? And don't underestimate that they can be responsible at a very early age. Assume that your kids can learn how to be good stewards of their money early on.
Oh, what fantastic advice. And I'm going to do that one this weekend. I'm going to ask them about their experience. That's excellent. Excellent. I've never heard that one. That's perfect. So any of the other little pieces of advice you want to share something with your book before we go today?
The purpose of the book is really just to get families talking to each other more. And if something seems hard and you feel like you can't talk about it, that is not true. Go and talk to someone about what you feel like is hard to talk about, or that your family wouldn't listen to you, or they wouldn't understand, because understanding it can happen. And everybody just needs to slow down a little bit and listen a little more.
Oh, Rochelle, this was so helpful. And thank you for your many, many years of service helping families. I can see, I can just tell from your experience and your stories that you've gotten a lot of families on the right track. So keep doing what you're doing. I look forward to finally seeing the book in print, and hopefully we can talk again once your book is out, and I'm sure you're going to get lots of good feedback.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Again, this was Kim Edelston with Ruschelle Khanna for familybusiness.org.